Portrait of a Lady. I don't know where to begin. Like Thomas Pynchon says, or said when he first started writing, he's like, if I can only get like 10% of what is up here out, then it'll be nice. Wait, I know where to begin. The beginning. Chapter 1. Under certain circumstances, there are few hours in life more agreeable than the hour dedicated to the ceremony known as afternoon tea. This is how we open. And it actually says a lot about what I want to say and about what I like about this book. These sentences that we can take. I've mentioned it several times already on these videos in class. Nietzsche doesn't like people who sift through and take as they will, but we're taking the whole work, and then we're also taking these sentences as we go. I don't even know if those are the sentences we're taking. Nietzsche, I'm coming for you, buddy. Those are just the sentences that are memorable, and maybe those are the conceits, the little masterpieces that we find here. I'll say it again, the sentence. I'll read it again. Upon certain circumstances, there are few hours in life more agreeable than the hour dedicated to the ceremony known as afternoon tea. So right away, as an impressionable comma, I see that, wow, I should dedicate an hour to just afternoon tea. I'm drinking coffee. I need to place this better so I can turn around, because I'm going to be turning around when I have nothing to say. But for Henry James to begin here, and for us to trust him, this one I will not tire of repeating, but we should trust. Just read this with trust. Don't disagree with him. Do it after if you must, or just in spurts, but for the most part, we should trust. Henry James, canonical. I'm going to trust you, buddy, when you say that, hey, afternoon tea. Oh, as if we didn't already know that. A reminder that we should relax. Here it is in the afternoon, sipping tea. He goes on to spend the first paragraph explaining this idea that there's a little eternity here to be enjoyed. And then it's funny, I started the Bostonians, and one line that stood out to me was there's these two women in the 1860s, abolitionists. One is more of a natural gifted speaker. Her name is Verena, and the other is someone who is not so naturally gifted, but just loves and is obsessed with the idea of the suffrage of women and the equality of women. And these two, at the end of a night where music kind of brought them together, the sun sets, the end of the evening, the sun sets, and for a moment, just this takeaway line, for a moment, the night was more hateful than the entire history of the oppression of men. So you couple that with the afternoon tea, and then you remember a line such as Hugo's in Les Miserables, where he says that the one thing that will ward off criminals, the one thing that will, make someone not fear walking around is light. Like, get some street lights out here, man. Hey, if you're listening to me and you work at a level where you can, hey, parfait. You work at a level where you can enact some change. Can you give us some more street lights? Please. Then again, we think of Pascal, whom I read right here a couple Easters ago. This is a read outside for Easter. However, he had something to say that, hey, no one is targeted for a crime unless they're vain. Unless you're showing vanity, you're not going to get targeted for a crime. So remember that. Meanwhile, I'm recording myself on my front porch. Is that vain? Anywho, these lines, night, day, Henry James, man. Funny about Henry James. I read a little bit about his bio, and I forgot how I came across exactly. Oh, in one of his bios, it said something like, then he tried plays for a little bit, and they went terrible. So I'm just like, oh, I tried play. Let me check it out. What happened? His play, the night it premiered, he went and watched another play, Oscar Wilde, because he couldn't bear to see it on stage. So nervous, so sensible. But he did return for when it was over, and the actors didn't have the gall to tell him that by Act 2, Act 1 went well. By Act 2, hecklers heckled, and there was one moment with an outfit that kind of sent it all overboard, and they started laughing. And then when they called him on stage at the end, after no one wanted to tell him for the final, hey, and actually, there's theories that an actor was mad at him, and that's why he pulled him on stage to get the applause. But they harangued him in such a major way. These animals, it was like a zoo, is what several authors in the audience described it, and he was just completely life sucked out of him. But Henry James wrote so much, man, so much, and that's kind of why. We're kind of turned off by that, aren't we? Man, this guy wrote I actually don't know the exact number, but I know it's at least a dozen novels. I'm probably understating. A dozen novels, 500 pages long, so many plays, so many short stories. No, you know what? I can paint a picture. Picture 24 volumes of this. 24 volumes of 500 pages. We hear that and we're like, damn, isn't there something smaller I can digest that teaches me the same thing? That's at least what kind of turned me off from Henry James in the beginning, but not exactly, because there's other people whom I've given much of my time, authors and people alike. One of them is Marcel Proust, whom I've mentioned a couple times right now, by now, and he wrote In Search of Lost Time, 1.2 million words, 6 or so volumes, and it's written in a period that's a little past James's time, but I've read this and it's like, this is top tier stuff, man. This is pinnacle, one of the 7 final bosses of literature. I'm trying to map those out. Finnegan's Wake is certainly a final boss of literature, or the canon, or the Western canon. Can't speak on Eastern too much. Only dabbles. But Finnegan's Wake, In Search of Lost Time. So you read these, dude. I've already read this 1.2 million words. What, you want me to read Henry James too? That was my mindset for the past couple of years, until The Portrait of a Lady was just. It's weird how we pick books up. I've had this edition in my house for a couple of years now, but something about putting down language for a second. Learning German for a second, and wanting to just remember what it's like to read a novel. And let me say, it's pretty good. Pretty good. Now I'm going to take a sip, and afterwards, I'm going to hop into telling you we'll walk through the novel itself. Let's go. Let's start with the plot summary. Everyone, please take a sip, would you? We need to be kind of synchronized for this one. It's like I'm telling the students, it's like, if we all focus on one thing, if we all watch The Crucible, if we all watch this Shakespeare play, we all work as one to understand this and put our phones down, put our other things down. This is hard for me to do. I was just playing Balatro, trying to watch movies with Anna. She's napping, but sometimes it's like, we know this, right? If we all focus on one thing, it's more enjoyable. Let's take another sip for the afternoon tea, am I right? It's coffee, intenso, espresso. All right. The Portrait of a Lady follows a young woman named Isabella Archer, born in America, but before she's even 16 has traveled the world because her father has taken her and her two sisters around the world. He wanted them to see what the world was like so they wouldn't develop national prejudices. Oh, my country's the best. Just to see what the world was like, to be more worldly, which already raises a twofold coin in the history of thought. Because on one hand, yeah, we want to be worldly, we want to understand, we want to travel, but on the other hand, I think most of us know that just by traveling alone, we don't see a lot. So, in addition to taking them around, her father has supplied her, even though he didn't have the best income, and actually a major part of this story is the money. God, I hope to remember to bring that up. Even though he didn't have this sizable income, he was still able to supply her with books, with the availability of books. Now they moved from here to here, here to here. Two sisters, Isabella, always reading, always observing, not necessarily tasked to do anything. Hey, we're going to go here. You can read all day. It's just you're going to be in this country. So I guess that does do away with the idea. Oh, she's worldly. She's not exactly talking to other people and conversing. She's observing. She's definitely Emerson's eye. She's the observer. She's the subject, as opposed to the object, which the entire world wants to make her, and we'll definitely get into that. Yeah, so she can read. She develops her reading before 16, reads a lot of authors, and her cousin, whom she ends up meeting in England, among other relations, is a philosopher. Actually, chapter 5, I was just reading on the toilet before beginning this to kind of prep myself. Ralph Touchett, I thought it was touche for the whole book, was a philosopher, but nevertheless he knocked at his mother's door at 6:45 with a good deal of eagerness. Even philosophers have their preferences, and it must be admitted that of his progenitors, his father ministered most to his sense of the sweetness of filial dependence. Couple things to say. Let's get the money question out there. One of my favorite things about literature, and one of the takeaway lessons, at least that I've taken, is that money does not solve everything. In fact, it worsens things. Let's give you a couple examples. Recently, rereading Moby Dickathy, Herman Melville, or Ishmael, happens to write one night when he describes how sweet it is to lay in a cold house, but in a warm blanket, how you feel like an Arctic crystal, and it's just the most magnificent feeling. I know we can relate to this. You're just so cold, but you have that warm blanket. You're an Arctic crystal, just warming up. And he says it's one of the negative luxuries of the rich to have a fireplace in your home. So, okay, you can take a small example like that, or you can go back to the large one, talking about Jesus, talking about it's easier for a needle to enter it's easier for a camel to enter a needle than it is a rich man to get into heaven. Excuse me, not getting it right. Actually feeling more sorry for the rich. These are hard things. These are, guys, listen, even saying it out loud, I know how it sounds. However, let me just leave on this, the most powerful note, I think, when it comes to people with money, Shakespeare. Sorry to put his name so close to that epithet, but his writing, we're looking at nobles, and we're looking at the fools, too. The upper and the lower end up, often the lower ends up showing more beauty, if not all the time, first of all. And second of all, to have everything, to have money, to have power, to have position, to have love, and to still suffer. Like Leontes, king of I don't know, Bohemia, some place, in The Winter's Tale. He has everything. He has a best friend. He has a beautiful wife. He has a king. He has beautiful children. and still he's susceptible to jealousy. Hamlet has damn near everything except, oh, his uncle killed his dad. But just knowing that money is not a solve all. All right, I got that out of the way. Still haven't even got to the book. So Isabella Archer, American, well-bred enough. Mom not in the picture, which is very interesting. I'm going to take a sip. Shouts out to Mom. Mom is not in the picture, which wasn't really much on my in the immediate forefront of my mind while reading, but looking back, it makes a lot of sense, especially because later, minor spoilers, but don't worry, I'll cut you major spoilers at one point. But at one point, she meets a woman who, frankly, ends up running her world and taking advantage of her. And I don't know, maybe a mother figure would have prevented that. Already on the top of my mind, I try to think of, do absent father figures lead to males getting taken advantage of by other males? We won't get into the examples because I really need to stick to the book. I'm going to try to keep this under 30. But it's okay if we go over. Yeah, so no mother, a couple sisters, and the sisters are lightly talked about. One is the pretty one, and one is the one that marries a man who's very argumentative. And I think that's one of my favorite parts about James, is that his dialogue it hits, for lack of a better word. It illuminates on things that yes, I could go into examples on, but really the takeaway is if you surround yourself with this dialogue, I think you get better at conversation. Or maybe you don't, but maybe you can see it and you can kind of, because you've seen what it's like to witness a husband just be disagreeable, just on everything. So that's one of her sisters. Other sisters not talked about too much. However, she's sitting in her dark library one day when her aunt from England visits her and says, "Let's go. Come on, would you go?" And there's a kind of a cute moment where the aunt says, "Hey, where is your, is it your mom? Or, oh no, where is your big sister? Where's your sister? Oh, she's out and about. She's been out for a couple hours." And her aunt says, "Oh, really? She must be a very big gossip." And then Isabella retorts and says, "You must be an even more bigger gossip than her, since seeing as you've been out for even longer." And the aunt smiles at that retort. A lot of small moments like that. So she gets taken away. Freudian slip. She moves to England. She says, "Listen, I'm going to explore." Her aunt gives her an opportunity. Says, "Why don't you come for a couple of years? I'll take you under my tutelage." Isabella says, "You know what? Sure." And a lot of the novel takes a look at her inner workings, the inner workings of her mind, balancing, should I do this, should I not, what are the advantages, what are not, when it comes to traveling, when it comes to the men that will not stop proposing to her. My God. So she gets to England and she meets her uncle, Mr. Touchett, her cousin, Ralph Touchett, who's like the philosopher we mentioned, but crippled, always sickly throughout the whole novel, kind of has his reservations about him. And his dad, the uncle, actually ends up dying. Screw it, we're getting into spoilers, dude. Kind of spoilers at this point, minor, but honestly, I got major spoiled by reading freaking Harold Bloom's introduction to Henry James, and he straight up said, the number one spoiler, he literally, there's something that happens on page 540 of 542 pages, and it's like, really? But I still enjoyed it. Might have enjoyed it more. However, the uncle dies. He's a rich American man who's kind of made his money in England, and he's adjusted to the culture. Let's see here, actually. He's talking to she's talking to her cousin. I put 3 stars next to this moment, so it must be good. "You are easily charmed, my lord," said Isabel. "No, I am not easily charmed." And then he stopped a moment. "But you have charmed me, Miss Archer." All right, this is actually the first of the suitors in this book. Talk about a young woman who moves to Europe, and who would have guessed that 3 men proposed to her, not counting an American who proposed to her back before she moved. And just her battle of, I want to explore the world, I want to become my own woman, I want to see what the world has to offer, but she can hardly go a couple of weeks without some man wanting to take her, as if we needed a reminding of that. But really, if you truly need that to be sunk into your heart, and maybe whether you think about something like that often or not, this could entrench isn't really a positive word, is it? But it can entrench that idea into you, or at least keep it before your mind. "These words were uttered with an indefinable sound which startled the girl. It struck her as the prelude to something grave. She had heard the sound before, and she recognized it. She had no wish, however, that for the moment such a prelude should have a sequel, and she said, as gaily as possible and as quickly an appreciable degree of agitation would allow her, 'I'm afraid there is no prospect of my being able to come here again.'" Yeah, there's a lot of moments where they get a faint idea of what's to happen. So another look at fate James offers us. But yeah, so she's living with her cousin, her aunt, and her uncle. Uncle shortly dies, and yeah, we're getting spoilers. The uncle, on his deathbed, what the cousin does is says, "Listen, uncle, I want you to give 50K or so, maybe actually by modern terms, 200, 300, 400, 500K, maybe even $1 million, I don't know, to Isabella Archer, and I don't want you to say I gave you the idea, okay?" So the uncle says, "You know what, sure." Think of an old man in your life who's kind of solid and really doesn't budge and just did well in life, well-to-do businessman. Okay, sure. Isabella gets this money, and a little before that, we see that she has rejected a Lord Warburton, an English lord who, honestly, we're annoyed with with him at the beginning, along with Isabel. Like, really, dude, you're already trying to propose to her. But as the book goes on and she ends up making other choices, Lord Warburton only like rises in estimation until he does something else. But he actually gets like stronger physically and mentally, and he kind of resembles, I don't know, think of like a Kenneth Branagh in Hamlet. Look it up. Even more manly. Or maybe think of like a Brendan Fraser, but English in The Mummy. That's what he ends up looking. But she rejects him. She rejects an American and says, "Listen, Caspar Goodwood, he ended up flying out, and he ends up flying out. Sorry, I had a thought I'll tell you about in a second. And says, 'Come on, will you marry me, please?' He throws out all the stops. It's not too convincing even for the reader. It's like, nah. But he says, 'I'll give you 2 years. Come on, in 2 years, will you give me an answer?' She's like, 'Listen, I'm not going to give you 2 years. I'm not going to marry you. Listen, you come back in 2 years, I'm going to tell you no. You can come back and ask me. I'm going to say no.' It's like, okay. She gets 2 years to travel. Kind of that night, that refreshing feeling of, I don't have to think about this for 2 years. Me, when I'm off of work for more than oh man, I have 2 days, and then it sneaks up faster than we think. Hope you're having a blessed Saturday, by the way. So she rejects these two, and she says, "You know what, Aunt," to her aunt, Mrs. Touchett, "I will travel with you. Let's go to Florence. Let's go to France." And they do, and guess what happens? Take a sip with me, would you? So they go to Florence. And yeah, there's some beautiful descriptions of what Paris is. And I guess this is a time to comment on Henry James's style before we go further and I forget. First is kind of like Plutarch, and with any new author that we take on, the first 100 or so pages, maybe a little less, are just your mind can't quite process this style. I'll even go to a moment that I like, but when I read it, the more we read something, the more we surround ourselves with something, the more it expands our brain. Kant talks about this. He says, I'm not going to begin to describe how he says it, but he describes anytime we learn something new, like if we put our mind to it, we can literally see how, for example, the game Balatro. Check it out if you haven't. Balatro, great game. Shouts out John, shouts out Paul, shouts out Ant. You play this game, and you're just like, even looking at it, you're like, what is going on? But you need to play it for a couple of minutes. You can see, if you pause to reflect, oh my God, I know so much more than I didn't. And it's like, we can't learn all at once. We learn a little bit at a time. You just have to expose yourself to it. So expose yourself to these authors' styles. And I can't say how, but it really does have an effect on how you write and think. Caspar Goodwood bent his eyes again and gazed for a while into the crown of his hat. A deep flush overspread his face, and Isabel could perceive that this dart at last had struck home. To see a strong man in pain had something terrible for her, and she immediately felt sorry for her visitor. That style wasn't too hard to discern, but listen to how her mind, now she feels sympathy. One thing about Isabella Archer's character is that, I guess the word they use to describe her is that she's original. She's rare, and in the Bostonians, I already noticed James is doing this with the character Verena, just by showing us this person who has this endless potential. I know potential can be a bad word because it's not a sign of things that are present, but truly, like, she's the mirror. She's a true mirror. Like Jane Austen's, what's her name? Fanny in Mansfield Park, or just anyone you know who is just everyone has this to some extent. The genius in them that matches someone's energy, just depends on what energy you're matching. I think that determines your genius. Oh man, now you guys are teaching me just by having me talk, because now I'm realizing that some people can only match other people's energies, and that's how they trains their genius. And I guess someone like Isabella or Fanny, or insert your favorite poet here, does that to everyone, and then turns to the page, I think. So that's Isabella with her style and her genius. And it's funny that Henry James can capture these women so well. So they go to Florence, her and her aunt. Before she does, she kind of leaves sour taste in Mr. Warburton's mouth, and the American, Lord Warburton. And even her cousin, it's kind of like her cousin, I think he was upset that, several people were upset that she didn't marry. It's like, why aren't you marrying? Why aren't you marrying? She also has an American friend who is a journalist, a woman. And the American friend is, she's very, what's the word? She's go-getter, ambitious. She's like boom, boom, boom. The aunt hates her because she's not, I don't know. I don't want to say it just because she's speaking her mind, but she does this character really tells you how am I forgetting her name? Maybe it's telling that she writes for a newspaper and I'm forgetting her name. Hopefully it comes back. But she has her American friend who accompanies her a little bit. She goes in and out. Okay. So we're in Florence now, page 173 of the Como se dice edition, Barnes & Noble. She meets someone named Madame Merle. She meets her stepping up behind her, and she sees her playing on the piano. She's playing wonderfully. And then the book goes into 10, 20, 30, 40, at least 10 pages describing who Madame Merle is. And I swear, the way they were describing her, Henry James was describing her, I was getting vibes of my master in poetry, just someone who is skilled at everything: music, conversation, writing. She writes letters. But then she sinks back into sociable. She's got it all. And actually, the only criticism Isabella's cousin can give her is that she's too perfect and she's lost all nature. She's too civilized just to have someone who you can't find a fault with. It's like, what's going on? What's going on? And I'm over here like taking things that I'm pretending to be Isabella, like ooh ooh ooh. Why did I say Isabella? Isabel. I judge more than I used to, Madame Merle said to Isabel, but it seems to me that I have earned the right. One can't judge till one is 40. Before that, we are too eager, too hard, too cruel, and in addition, too ignorant. I am sorry for you. It will be a long time before you are 40, but every gain is a loss of some kind. I often think that after 40, one can't really feel. The freshness, the quickness have certainly gone. You will keep them longer than most people. It will be a great satisfaction to me to see you some years hence. I want to see what life makes of you. One thing is certain. It can't spoil you. It may pull you about horribly, but I defy it to break you up. This Madame Merle character takes Isabel under her wing. This mother figure. Isabel's more impressed by her than she is by her aunt because she's well-read, she's well-traveled, she can play, she seems to know everything. And Isabel can't disagree on anything she says. Have you ever met someone where it's like literally everything they're saying is taking you in? Me, maybe 3 for me in different stages of my life. Not counting authors. Now, unfortunately, we started with minor spoilers, moderate spoilers. We're getting into major spoilers. So if you're just here, you don't plan on reading this too much. Honestly, even if we talk about this, you can still enjoy this book. Just a heads up. So Madame Merle takes her under her wing. But what ends up happening is... Well, it's weird because the aunt doesn't really trust Madame Merle. She just has reservations about her. The American journalist just doesn't really... She's gone out of the picture, so Isabel maybe doesn't have that influence. She just gives her all to Madame Merle. And then we meet a new character, Osmond. And what Madame Merle... We see a conversation between Madame Merle and Osmond. Hey! Oh, apologies. It comes out that Isabel inherits this, let's just say, $1 million from her uncle. Probably a little more, actually. It's like 40K. Yeah, it's definitely more. 40K in the late 1800s, I'm sorry. Or mid-1800s. Let's just say 5-10 mil. Madame Merle catches wind of this. And it's weird because it's the first break of character we see in Madame Merle. Wait, why would she... So fast forward just a little bit, and Madame Merle's... Sorry, we get a top-down, unusual for this book, like probably halfway through, a little before halfway, we're separated from Isabel, and we just get a description of this Roman palazzo or little plaza. We go down into this kind of rustic little townhouse, and it's kind of giving Godfather 2 vibes, which I need to rewatch. Because last time I did, my grandfather on my mother's side called me while my grandfather on my father's side was sitting in my room while I was recovering from scoliosis and watching movies with me, and halfway through one of the best movies of all time, I decided to answer a call from my grandfather and talk to him, and I didn't have the gall to say, "I'll call you back." So I ended up talking to him through for 20 minutes while the movie was playing. But yeah, those kind of vibes. It's just. But then we meet this character. There's a little girl named Fanny, another Fanny. Ooh, good connection. And Osmond, her father. Now Osmond's just this kind of a dark figure, artist type, brooding. He ends up being someone who's a little too obsessed with art, and too obsessed with the world and what other people think of him, but he plays it off as he's not. Like, he really wants to host these parties every week. He wants to be in control. He doesn't have money, but he gives off this figure of, ooh, I'm a mysterious brute. He collects things. Him, his daughter, and then Madame Merle comes in and says, hey, I want to introduce you to someone. So Madame Merle's the one who introduces Isabel Archer to this man named Osmond. And she conducts it so well, Madame Merle does, that Isabel doesn't suspect anything. Just doesn't try to set Isabel up. That's the number one thing. Isabel has such a sense of, oh, I'm being hit on right now. I'm being proposed to. at the same time, she has this trust of Madame Merle, and it's this I can't really capture or relay here, is the idea of that she, throughout the story, there's little cuts in Madame Merle's armor, little glints, little chinks in her armor that is that bad, that show that she's not to be trusted. And slowly, Isabel, freaking words, man. Slowly, Isabel sees, it's like, oh wait, Madame Merle never did this. Like, to see someone so perfect, but there's that every like 20, 30 pages, a little moment in her character where, like, for example, James will say something like, Madame Merle was not the type of person to annoy someone by agreeing with them on everything. It's like, ooh, so remember not to agree. And then she did. Or a little, in another moment, Madame Merle, this is several times actually, Madame Merle is not the type of person to change her mind when she's challenged. So she'll back down, and this is actually, she almost always does. It's like, someone calls her out on something, and she always has a good excuse. Not excuse, another reason, and she ends up being right. It's like, God, such this powerful figure, taking Isabel up on her wing and setting her up to marry. So Isabel's introduced to Osmond, and she's slowly like, Madame Merle, what's going on? What's going on? And what ends up happening is Isabel ends up marrying Osmond. Everyone says, what? Her cousin, Ralph Touchett, her aunt, her American friend, they're all just like, are you kidding me? You for different reasons. Some are like, you denied a lord, you denied that the American girlfriend wants her to marry the American boy. The lord's like, what, are you kidding me? You gave up this? And the cousin's like, what? For this guy? Him? But it's weird. It's like, why did Isabel do it? I'm really going to explain love, first of all. Maybe she saw something in Fanny, Osmond's daughter, who's like this picture of purity. She's half sometimes in the cloister, but truly as pure as they can get. Just moments of, she has no, I don't want to say it's artificial, but in a good way. Just totally like this well-bred, like this innocence that maybe that's why. Also, Osmond played it so well that it didn't look like he wanted to. He didn't have money, so Isabel actually saw a chance, like, oh, I can help not only this artist, but his daughter, and then I can step into this role where I can help people. Not only that, but she has been traveling for a year and a half or 2 years at this point, and it's like, you know what? Okay, I have seen the world. It's like, also Madame Merle loves him, so it's like, to see all these concatenations, to use a Proustian word/joke. Concatenations is like a connection, a convergence that Monsieur Charlie, one of the arguable villains in Search of Lost Time, ends up using in a very, very apt moment. God, I hope my phone keeps me going. If not, I'll just start a new recording. However, and please forgive anything evil I've said in this review. Oh, speaking of, why read novels? I had a comment recently from someone, very good comment, saying, you know what? I agree with you about philosophy and introducing people to them at a young age, but I think novels can really help. And I do too. As long as the novel is true, I mentioned that comment, but if you can capture true character and what it's like, and you don't paint the world in too rosy of a color or too grim of a color, you really just show the world how it is, and yes, novels will help. But Don Quixote is an example of how novels sometimes can't help. This knight who reads all these romance novels and thinks he's this man thinks he's a knight, this skinny man, Don Quixote, who goes around and charges at people because he's read so much romance novels that he thinks it's true. Don Quixote, I need to read the second half and get to that eventually. maybe sooner rather than later. Okay, that, she marries Osmond, and kind of the novel fast forwards a year or two, switches, and now she's Mrs. Osmond, Mrs. Gilbert Osmond. I don't know quite what else to say. I mean, it will be major spoilers, but it slowly comes out. It ends up coming out, the truth of what happened, the truth of Osmond's character, actually. And it's weird. Isabel's so dedicated to him that he is in control of everything. He's argumentative, shuts down everything, and you just kind of see, not that, I guess you could argue the deterioration of Isabel's character by marrying him. And but the American friend, whose name I still don't remember, does convince her, I can go at the end, does convince her at one point, say, hey, get out of this before it ruins your character. People are trying to convince her, get out of this marriage, you can get out, you have no shame. It's like, And it's funny because some people try to convince her, like the American who wants to marry her, Henrietta Stackpole was the name of the female reporter from America, but the American tries to convince her at one point, but Isabel says, you're in love, it's because you're in love with me, or that's kind of the impression that she's getting. Her cousin and her have a falling out because her cousin has strong words to say about her. And it's like, oh my gosh, the tension's rising, the reader at this point is like, Isabel, you should get out too. It's funny how the readers were so for Isabel in the beginning, but by the end we're like, girl, come on, girl. I don't have as many moments highlighted as I do in Proust, and I think I might end on a little comparison. But I'm trying to think if I should talk more about the plot and what happens. I think I can. Let's see it all the way through. But one more sip before we do that. Or two or three, no pressure. So, at one point, a young man who Isabella knew when she was younger and actually kind of went with him, I hope my cat Chula gets into frame. At one point, her adopted stepdaughter is being, what's the word? Suited, hit on, flirted, seduced. Whatever. Someone wants to propose to her. The dad doesn't want it. Gilbert Osmond, Isabel's husband, does not want this. So what Isabel does is listens. It's so strange to see Isabel, who was so adamant and so singular and individual and denying these suits from multiple people. Great candidates, if you can even say that. It's sad to see that when it comes to her stepdaughter, she listens to the husband and says, yeah, no, your dad's right. You don't marry this person you're in love with. You should marry this guy. It's like, what? So Isabel as a mirror, Isabel as someone who to be taken advantage of. This is a good book to read for people who are idealistic. That's one thing that her cousin and her American friend accuse her of. Hey, you're too much into your ideals. You're going to get taken advantage of. It's like several times throughout the book. However, she says, no, don't marry this young man who's going for you. Your dad wants you to marry this rich guy. It's like, so even more, not even a double strike at that point. Freedom, get rid of freedom, go for the money. It's a triple strike because the person the dad wants his daughter to marry, Osmond, is Isabel's once suitor, Lord Warburton, the English dude who comes back and is like, ooh, I'm going for the daughter. And it's like, oh my God. So now Isabel is faced with her ex-love. They never really went out and developed that, but it was always a possibility. Having to say yes to her husband's pursuit of, I want my daughter to marry this rich man. It really compounds, and all of this still doesn't convince Isabel fully. And actually, it slowly does. It slowly wears on Isabel. It's like, what's going on? to see that slow melting of the mind or shattering of her character throughout the novel is very powerful. And the deal breaker. One day Isabel walks in and she sees Madame Merle and her husband talking, and she doesn't really put anything together, but she's but it is finally revealed that, hey, Madame Merle did set this up. How is it revealed? Well, Osmond's sister, who looks like a bird, shouts out all my birds, and who's actually, at first it's weird. God, so many parallels. First time meeting the sister, James describes her as as a bird with a beak who's straight up ugly. Physiognomy important for James. Chatterbox, concerned with surface level details. She's the one, the opposite of Madame Merle, who's restricted, contained, beautiful, masterful. She's the one that ends up relaying the truth to Isabel that actually, this is the major spoiler, top 2 spoilers. I'll give you a second. Madame Merle and Osmond actually had a kid together. That's Fanny. So Madame Merle is Fanny's true mother. And they didn't want ever to get out, and Merle saw Isabel Archer, as a opportunity for money to get brought in. Even after this is revealed, Isabel's like, I'm gonna go see my dying cousin, but she's still, Osmond's like, no, you're not, you're gonna stay here. And it's like, even after all this is revealed, Isabel, true, independent, mirror, representation poet of all time, struggles to break from Osmond. She ends up visiting her cousin and her aunt. Her aunt asks 3 questions. Her aunt is kind of like my grandma. She's just like, I have 3 questions for you. Is it true that Madame Merle, is it true about this? Is it true? And kind of like the aunt finds out everything. And Isabel's like, yes, yes, yes. Let me see my cousin. And the cousin's dying, but he saves up enough energy to talk to Isabel. I remember reading this part in a Chinese restaurant, China A Go Go, as I was waiting for my lemon and sesame chicken and chow mein. Ralph, Isabel's cousin, and her have this talk on her deathbed, like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I love you. It was me that gave the money. Oh my God, I love you. Oh shit, I'm sorry that this split us. You're going to a peaceful place now. And Ralph's like, no, don't think that. You live in a better place. I love you. I love you. However, Ralph says, but are you going to stay with Osmond or are you going to come back here? And it's like, Isabel says, I don't know. Let's not talk about that. It's like, really? So Henrietta talks to her again, the American, and the Caspar Goodwood even comes back and asks her, like, are you going to stay? You already did the hard part, is leaving your husband back there. But before she left, Fanny asked Isabel, hey, don't leave me. And it's like, that was foreshadowing. Oh my God, Isabel's going to do it. That, and I got spoiled. That eventually, in the last page and a half, can't get more spoiler than this, Caspar Goodwood, the American who has been suiting her since she was 16 back in America, she's like, hey, come on, do this. You can do this. Like, the whole world is yours. It's weird because as a reader, you're like, Caspar, come on, man, you got this. You got to convince her, man. But Caspar he messes up because he kisses her. So he kisses her, and she gets like this flash of lightning. It's nighttime. She ends up running out. In this scene of action, this is good action. It's like, oh my God, she's running and she's seeing visions. And then it cuts, and Caspar is talking to Henrietta, and it's like, yeah, she did go back. Bro, why'd you kiss her, man? You're trying to convince her that she can do everything, and it's like, that might have been the deal breaker. Isabel ends up returning to Osmond. Like, why would she go back to Osmond? I'll leave that answer to you. I don't know why. I could suppose. But I will say that it's okay to talk about these people. That's what the one thing good when people die. Oh, thank God we can talk about them. Henry James is dead. We can talk about him now. These characters. Imagine substitute every name I've said for a real life person, and this video gets kind of creepy. Then again, what was I reading last night? I was reading some Coleridge, and he said there's nothing like contemporary genius to inspire us. So yes, contemporary genius, people that are near us, maybe just died or still alive, yes, those are inspiring, but we don't talk about them and their decisions in their life. This is what a novel's good for. really going into the mind and the dialogue of somebody. How does that develop? What are the changes? What are the concatenations? That's a portrait of the lady. I enjoyed it. I'm going to keep reading some James. It's Henry James era. However, I don't want to do James disservice, but so maybe I won't. But I must stress that this Marcel Proust guy, who's coming a couple years after James, he's much more quotable. There's many more moments where I'm just like, I'm starring. I don't know if it's because I used to be a bigger annotator than I was. Babe, are you saving me from the end of my video? Or then the doggy's out? Tito! I think we should end with Tito on camera, actually. 50 minutes? My gosh. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to one-up Henry James, but if you do get on camera, it's going in unedited. I'm not going to one-up... Can you get on camera? I'm not going to one-up Henry James by ending on Proust, frankly. I'm going to take another sip of my tea and let my wife end the video how she pleases. Finger on the trick, finger on the... Yeah. Shouts out Henry James. Shouts out to my wife. She saved me. And you can be saved too. Hi. My name is Lucas Thomas, and this is Tito Thomas Balderas Nunez. And if you know a Pomeranian out there who's survived cancer, depression, tracheal collapse, and the mauling of a 4-year-old peak dog, then reach out to the foundation of Tito today. Link in the description.